Welcome to the PCN Capitol Preview. I'm Larry Casper. Today we're talking about transportation funding, but first we're joined by Carter Walker, reporter at VoteBeat. Welcome, Carter.
Hi, Larry. Thanks for having me.
You filed a story about the retention election for judges, but first, can you give us a brief refresher on what retention is?
Yeah, so here in Pennsylvania, we elect our judges for most courts. That includes the Supreme Court, Superior Court, and Commonwealth Court. Those are appellate courts at the state level, and all of them have judges up for retention this year. And what retention is, judges serve 10-year terms when they're first elected. So after those 10 years, they go back to the voters, and it's a yes-no question on, do you want to retain this judge for another 10 years? So, like I said, we have 3 judges on the Supreme Court up this year for retention, as well as 1 each on the lower appellate courts, Superior and Commonwealth.
The story you filed, Carter, emphasized the race for Supreme Court, the 3 candidates for retention there. Tell us who those candidates are, please.
Yeah, so there are 3 candidates, like you said. There's Christine Donahue, Kevin Dougherty, and David Weck. They're all Democrats, or rather, when they first ran in 2015, I believe, they ran with the Democratic nomination. But this time around, when they run for retention, they're not going to have that party designation on the ballot with them. The idea is that, once you become a judge, you're supposed to be nonpartisan and not rule on, a political basis.
Carter, these Supreme Court justices for retention, just what kind of campaign do they run this time of year? Are they trying to get the word out?
They're definitely trying to get the word out that, that they feel, of course, that they should be retained and that they've done a good job. But campaigning as a judge is kind of tricky. When you campaign for city council or governor, you say, this is what I believe in, this is what I'm going to do if you elect me. But for judges, they have rules about how they can conduct themselves in public. They can't explicitly go out and say, if you elect me, I'm going to rule X way on X issue. So it can make their campaign a little tricky. But they are out and they're doing events. They just did an event down in Philly earlier this week, doing a live interview with WHYY. And they're pushing back on the criticism that they've gotten, that they are unfair or ruling in a partisan manner, talking about how they have set that aside since they were elected and tried to approach issues just on how they feel the law spells out how things should be decided. And that's what our story really sought to get into, is what were the decisions beyond just the campaigns we were seeing of vote yes or vote no to retain these folks.
Carter, how often are judges or justices who are running for retention successful, since it involves simply a yes or no vote?
Yeah, they are almost always successful. There was only ever 1 instance of a judge back in 2005, according to some research from our partners at Spotlight PA, who ever lost a retention election. So pretty much when you get on the bench, it's hard to get somebody off of it, unless they retire at age 75 or die, as we saw, unfortunately, a couple years ago with one of our Supreme Court justices.
Which party has the majority on the Supreme Court at this point? And this will lead into another question about the candidates themselves.
Yeah, so right now it's a 5-2 Democratic majority on the court. Donahue, Dougherty, and Weck, the judges up for retention, they're all part of that majority.
And while all these Democrats are running for retention, obviously Democrats want to maintain the majority on the court, but what are Republicans doing about it?
Yeah, so Republicans, this year would be the start of a 2-step battle to take control of the Supreme Court and shift it into Republican or conservative majority. The first part is to have voters say, no, we don't want to retain these judges. So this year, Republicans are pushing for voters to vote no, which means those judges would have to vacate their seats. And then it would be up to the governor and the legislature to appoint a replacement for the remainder of their terms, until the end or till the next municipal election. The next municipal election would be in 2027. So at that point, then Republicans would have a chance to take back the court with their own candidates if they're successful this year.
Oh, Carter, is it enough for the Republican Party to tell voters to vote no? Is that enough? In other words, are they supplying any reasons?
They are. They chiefly point to two issues. The judge's rulings on COVID-related matters during 2020, lockdowns and some of the governor's executive orders during that period. And then also a large part of what they bring up is their election law rulings over the past couple of years, some in 2020, some dating back to 2018, but they push those as reasons why voters should not retain them.
Carter, refresh us on the importance of Supreme Court here in Pennsylvania versus the other two courts, Superior and Commonwealth.
Right. Well, obviously, it is the top court, so what it says typically is the end of the line unless that gets appealed up to the United States Supreme Court. But they can have a tremendous impact on the day-to-day lives of Pennsylvanians. I focus on election law, and they've had a lot of significant rulings there, redistricting, how mail ballots get handled and processed. I mentioned, though, that, of course, they also ruled on matters related to COVID. They had a big ruling, I believe it was 2 years ago now, on the fairness of our school funding model. So they can have a tremendous impact on day-to-day life.
Last question, Carter. As far as the three Democrats are concerned who are running for retention on Supreme Court, how are they campaigning together? Are they appearing as a unit because they see that obviously there would be strength in numbers and that would help maintain the majority on the court?
Yeah, definitely appearing as a unit. I've seen them do at least two events in the last week. Like I said, one with WHYY down in Philadelphia, and trying consistently, it seems, to push a message that they approach these cases with a lens of what does the law say, not what does our personal political ideology dictate we would like to see the outcome of this case be. They're very much trying to push back against the narrative that they've ruled in a way that sways the playing field for their party.
All right. Thank you very much. Carter Walker, reporter at VoteBeat.
Thank you.
More of the PCN Capitol Preview after a short break. Welcome back. Our guests are Representative Kerry Benninghoff, Minority Chair of the House Transportation Committee, and Representative Ed Neilson, Majority Chair of the House Transportation Committee. Welcome to our program.
Thank you for having us.
The state budget is over 2 months overdue, and as a result, the public transit system, SEPTA in Philadelphia, is having trouble. Just how much does SEPTA rely on the state for funding? Representative Neilson.
Well, public transit across the Commonwealth relies on the state for a lot of money. It's $1 billion. But specifically, what we're seeing is transit companies across the country are having trouble. The COVID money from the federal government stopped. All that stuff stopped coming in, and they relied on that because, of course, people weren't going to work. People were working remotely. But a system like SEPTA, they move 1 million people a day. A day. To put it in perspective, in a center city, Philadelphia, there's 350,000 jobs. They go to work there every day. There's only 50,000 parking spots. Can you imagine what would happen to gridlock all across? Now, it's also the economic engine that keeps the Commonwealth going. The city of Philadelphia and this 5-county area, along with Allegheny, provide 46% of the entire state's budget. So people say, I'll never ride SEPTA. What do I care about them? You need to care, because if we stop that engine, there goes our tax dollars. So we came up with a plan to do this, to fund mass transit in all 67 counties, not just one county, all 67. The plan was rejected by the Republican Senate, and the governor had to come up with a plan of his own to flex capital dollars. Capital dollars is something that is supplied to the transit systems to do their capital improvements, so you don't have to take out of operations. What's capital improvements?
Yeah, give me an example.
Capital improvements is, in the last 6 months, we saw some of the regional rail cars caught on fire, moving people home from work. Okay, our rail cars, the rail cars of SEPTA and the buses are SEPTA, are 50-plus years old. So they have to constantly replenish and replace these items. That's capital dollars. Now, what impact does it have on people from across the Commonwealth? Those capital dollars spent in Pennsylvania total in the last 5 years, over $1 billion SEPTA spent across the Commonwealth in these capital dollars. So if you go to like Lancaster, okay, it's $7 million they spent in Lancaster. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of jobs. So just because it's out of SEPTA doesn't mean it's not impacting your community or your county. Those dollars are being spent, and it's something we have to consider. Now, we're not asking anybody to pay for our stuff, because let's be honest, Center County, Potter County, they can't help us pay our bills. What we're asking for is to keep a little bit of what we're putting in. We're providing the state with 46% of the budget. We're getting under 20% back. We want to keep a little bit of what we put in.
Representative Benninghoff, give us some more perspective, especially for the benefit of our viewers statewide, on how big a system SEPTA is. So we're talking lots of trains and buses. Just how big is it?
Well, I think you just said you have over 800,000 riders every day. And it's not just in the city of Philadelphia, but it's benefiting the surrounding communities as well. I think the challenge that we have is we have a relatively rural state with two major urban areas, and a lot of our more rural districts don't have systems as large as this, so it's kind of hard for them to comprehend it. And for our members who are also dealing with road and bridge problems, they don't always see it. But as Ed said, what's the alternative? How do you move that amount of people? There's a lot of major events coming into the city of Philadelphia on an annual basis. A lot going to be happening next year for our sesquicentennial of our country, 250th anniversary. So you've got to have a system that moves a lot of people as efficiently as possible. It's interesting for those who are living in rural areas, they struggle when they try to drive in through Philadelphia, because in our rural districts, we're used to driving everywhere. So it is a challenge, and trying to find the finances for that will be a consistent problem. This is a kind of a stopgap for a year or two.
Well, let's consider the status of SEPTA services today, right now. Services have been reduced. How much service has been reduced as of right now, with the plan to restore services on Sunday, which of course is good news? But where does the service stand today?
So last week they did a 20% cut in services, and there was a plan for another 20% to happen in January. So that has been halted.
And a court got involved. I understand a judge told him to restore these services. So who filed that lawsuit?
That was filed by citizens. That wasn't no group or something. We don't know. Of course, the lawyers, they're not telling us who's paying the bill. Somebody's paying the bill. I'm sure we'll find that out at a later date. But so that judge decided, hey, you have to restore these services. And these are services that we saw over the last 2 weeks as kids went back to school. You could see. I mean, when you drove down, when I drove to my district office, you're seeing people standing there waiting for buses, not even realizing, hey, my bus isn't coming, and literally getting out of my car saying, hey, listen, this bus stopped, you have to go over here, and telling them, because not everybody's watching the news.
So some people weren't even aware. They went to their bus stop as usual and then got disappointed. And then as you waited for some buses, it's overcrowded. You can't even get on. You have to wait. And the difference is instead of 20 minutes between buses, now it's an hour, and stuff like that. So things change. So seeing all that and recognizing all that, the leaders of SEPTA, the governor, and the House leadership said, listen, we got to do something. And that's when the governor stepped in and said, listen, we can't have these people suffer. This is not their fault that we can't get a good funding stream for the transit. So he stepped in. And the money you're talking about is this $394 million that was shifted over from another area, which was capital projects. And how big a term will this money cover? So
the capital project is $394 million, which will cover about a 2-year period. The need was $215 million. That's what SEPTA's need. So this is close. They're also got a fare increase that goes into effect that will net them another.
And that's going to happen anyway, isn't it?
Happen anyway. Should. Yes. This is all stuff that's been planned. So all that stuff's been accounted for. Unfortunately, it costs more to do to everything. Everything we're doing. Every homeowner, every person across the Commonwealth is feeling a little pain. Costs are going up, so we have to pay. So the fares are going to go up. Hopefully this will get them through over a hump, but that doesn't mean we can stop, because there's still an issue. There's an issue. And
the governor took the lead on this $394 million too, didn't he? In other words, how much involvement from the legislature was there? Representative Benninghoff, can you tell us?
Well, I think it's not a matter of the governor taking a lead on it. I was looking for different alternatives. I think it's important to realize that This money is set aside, as I said, for capital expenditures. So these systems, we're going to get some of this money anyhow, but no different than in your own home. You know, if your washing machine breaks today and you want to buy a new car in a month from now, maybe you have to delay doing that.
Was the legislature part of this decision-making process?
Well, yeah, they
That's
have to eventually support this because overall it's going to impact the budget. Again, trying to get it to finalization. This has been a big stumbling block in the budgetary process as a whole. But as Ed alluded to, this is temporary. This is not going to be the end all. And what worries me, in all honesty, is we're going to have the same discussion 2 years from now. I personally probably have a little bit different opinion that I think the fares probably should be increased on a more regular basis. We have not seen that for several years.
The fare increase discussed is 20-some%.
Well, let's talk dollars and cents. I think currently they're paying about $2.25, $2.50 for a ride. You know, I was sitting there thinking about, I just drove 100 miles to be down here today and back, and we see a lot of people in the rural areas, and that's what made it difficult for a lot of our members across the Commonwealth to be able to lay a positive vote down for these types of things, because I think they want to see more investment on the local level. One thing that Ed forgot to say, which I think is important, which is different for our areas, is SEPTA also provides transportation for kids to go to school. And that's different than in the rural areas where we have separate private paid busing systems. And so I think that is a unique thing. And we don't want the children, one, unsafely trying to get there, two, not having that transportation. So it's really a wrestling match in the different geographies across the Commonwealth, trying to understand each other's issues. As I said to you off camera, you know, Ed and I kind of represent the two ends of the spectrum, but yet we can serve on a committee and try to be congenial to get done what we can. But as far as process, there's only so many options of how to fund this thing. And so at the end of the day, without having to do a tax increase on anybody or any particular issue, let's use some of the monies like you would do in your own home and that are reserve dollars. And yes, maybe that means you got delayed by another bus or two, or upgrading a rail or a spur or additional lines, but that's what the taxpayers are doing. At the end of the day, I don't care what you call the funds, capital money, fare increases, it's all taxpayer money.
Well, now that this money is going to be put in place, this $394 million to help out SEPTA, and you're both lawmakers, of course, does this remove any of the urgency from completing your state budget, which is 2 months overdue?
So I think it doesn't alleviate the urgency of transit funding, but what it does is it takes that off the equation. So what you'll hear is the governor speak about how, listen, this is your stumbling block and this is why you can't get a budget done.
Right.
Let me take that off the table for you. Not saying it's not there, but I try to be clear to everybody. Everything's on the table until that governor signs that budget bill. So to say it's off the table, look, I hope it comes back today. I hope they say, hey, we don't need those capital dollars. We have a deal. So that's my goal. That's my hopes, because I have to be optimistic. I have to want it. We need this. And that was the good part that happened in the last 4 or 5 weeks, is we finally had the Republican Senate leadership team recognize there is a problem. They need, transit funding is an issue. They need to figure out a way. We need to figure out a way. All 4 caucuses, I mean, it's a math equation here, as we always say, 26, 102, and 1. It's a math equation. That's where we have to get those numbers and get a comprehensive funding plan up to the governor's desk for his signature. That's the job of our legislator. It's not our job to put up easy votes. I always say this. If your elected official is putting up votes that you love all the time, they're likely not doing their job. Okay, it's our job to put up hard, difficult votes, but they're the right ones that people are afraid of. And that's why it's a pleasure to serve with Kerry, because we've done everything through the committee in a bipartisan way. We put 5 transit bills over into the Senate, bipartisan bills. These weren't just party line. These were bipartisan votes. And we worked together to try and get a common denominator. We're never going to agree on everything, but we agree on a lot.
So what I'm hearing then is that mass transit is, you could say, off the table for 2 years anyway, and maybe if that issue was taken apart from the rest of the budget and settled, then the rest of the budget will come easier? That's what I think I'm hearing from you, Representative Neilson.
I would say that you removed a logjam of a major issue, because at the end of the day, if you do not use these dollars, where is the money coming from? Are you going to come up with a new resource? As you know, there's been other dialogues. There's been talking about taxing different other types of entities in order to get the money. We're looking at a budget that in its original proposal was raising the overall budget $3.5 billion. So you got to keep that in mind.
Right.
What is the overall budget going to increase this year from last year? Sadly, there's very few people who ever come to the legislature, whether individually or as the large body, asking for less money than they got last year. And you add in the cost of living and changes that have occurred, as Ed alluded to, the cost of products continues to go up. Transportation in general, just to put it in perspective, has seen about a 45% increase in materials and labor just since 2022. So whether you're building roads, building rail, looking at airway, whatever else, the cost to do all this has grown up immensely in a very short time period. I suspect SEPTA and all the transportation systems are seeing the same thing. So you either find new money or you use some of your reserves.
And this small fix that the governor put in, I mean, yeah, I get it, it's $394 million. But this can only be done for 2 transit companies, PRT and SEPTA.
Right.
That leaves
PRT being Pittsburgh, and we'll talk about them in a minute.
Yeah. And that leaves everybody else empty-handed. Who, when we did our hearings across the Commonwealth, we did our due diligence. They all need funding. So this has to. We have to keep this conversation going. And what I see is, if I had a crystal ball, I'd say these other agencies are going to start pressuring their elected officials because they don't have anything. They didn't get a piece of this. Now, where are they going to come from? How are they going to make ends meet? What they're going to end up having to do, because all this price is going up, you're going to see their services cut. They're going to cut. So that means one less senior will get to the hospital, one less senior will get to the doctor, one less kid. So all that stuff, that's going to get cut. They can't keep taking as many people, transporting as many people as they do today, tomorrow, without any increase. So this is a statewide issue. This isn't a PRT SEPTA. This is all 67 counties. So we have to do our due diligence. We can't wait 2 years. We can't wait 2 weeks if you ask some of these transit agencies. It needs to happen now. So we're going to keep on working towards a solution. A solution, how we can get funding. Maybe we start looking at local funding options and different things to let people raise money so they can do this themselves.
Well, now that you put it that way, Representative Neilson, just what other sources for funding are out there for SEPTA? Let's put aside the state part of the pie for now.
Well, we probably have 3 to 5 proposals currently in committee or in draft of talking about different funding options.
What's in place right now? Can you review that? So the company itself obviously has to charge fares.
Yeah, we did that. So that's fares. But local funding options, some people want to put different taxes on different goods within that community. We saw like the city of Chicago. In Illinois, what they did is Chicago did a 1% sales tax increase for all the surrounding counties and stuff. That's not what we're looking at yet, but we look at no options off the table. We try and look at everything. We heard Uber and Lyft put a fee on Uber and Lyft. New York did that for some of their stuff, and it wasn't enough. It showed not enough. So that's why when we did it, we said, okay, look, we saw a 2.9% increase in collections of sales tax. I says, out of that 2.9, what I like to do is I like to pull 1.75 for transit. And that other 0.25, I wanted to put in local roads and bridges.
This is a bill you have pending right now.
This is the bill we have. We have a few bills. Yes, this is one of. This is part of 2 bills.
This bill takes more money from sales tax.
It takes 1.75 from sales tax, and allows that to fund transit, and 0.25 for local roads and bridges, and says to the legislator, hey, you keep that other 0.9 and you do whatever you need to do with it. Because I didn't want to take it all. It's a 2.9. And history shows us that the sales tax collections go about 2% a year annually. So my theory was, so a lot of us thought about it hard and said, listen, let us keep a little bit of our own. And that's what I said. We're not asking for the other counties to fund us. We want to keep a little bit of our own because we talked about that sales tax mainly is generated out of these counties that have these large transit agencies. And that's what we wanted to do. Keep a little bit of what we're putting in. We didn't want to take off anybody. And we don't mind helping everybody else because we don't mind funding their transit or helping fund their roads and bridges because that's what we're doing. I call it the police, plow, and pave. Okay. Our counties are paying to police, plow, and pave those rural roads, those 3- and 4-digit roads that people see in the outer counties. And that's what we're just asking to keep. We don't mind helping you. I'm a Philadelphia guy, so I would say I'm from the city of brotherly love. We don't mind sharing, and we do care. I care about everybody. That's why we're Commonwealth. We share, and we don't mind sharing. But when we need help, we expect everybody to help us too. Because when you needed help, we're not saying, hey, we'll keep ours, you keep yours. I mean, because there's legislation pending about that as well. Saying, hey, listen, you keep your money, we'll keep ours. Let's see how you function then. So no one's saying that. That's not at the table. We just want a little help. And we respectfully ask for the viewers across the Commonwealth and the people across the Commonwealth to say, hey, yeah, you know what? They're right. Let them keep a little bit. They've been helping us out for so long. We're okay.
Representative Benninghoff, tell us more about the perspective of your caucus on the future of transportation funding in general and mass transit too, if you please. Is there pending legislation out there, anything similar to what Representative Neilson is telling us about?
Well, obviously anything that the majority chair is talking about, both chambers, both parts of our chamber look at those and find different ideas. But some of this is philosophically different.
What do you think about this plan of taking more money from sales tax, for instance?
Well, first of all, you're depending on the sales tax staying at a certain level, but there is money that will probably be taken away from other things.
There's no change to the sales tax itself being proposed.
No, the percentage is still the same that is being assessed on people. I heard some suggestions of possibly taxing Uber or some of these other organizations, raising some other local taxes. You know, philosophically, I struggle with the fact that we want to fund somebody else with taxing someone else. And I think that was part of the problem that the Senate saw with some of the different proposals. I can't speak for them specifically. I personally think that the fares should be a little bit more aggressive. You talk about 1 million riders. You know, what's 50 cents a day addition? What people forget and I don't like pitting rural versus urban, but in the rural areas where most people drive, they have to own cars, they have to pay car insurance, they have to pay for tire tax and everything else that's on that. And so there are an awful lot of annual costs on people who do not use these transit systems. And many of the rural ones that was spoken about earlier also receive money through the lottery, and a lot of those types of things are funded. We don't have large systems. Obviously, places like Lancaster, Harrisburg, Center County, we have specifically large systems. But as an example, I think you have to have systematic changes. You know, Penn State University, large entity, and several years ago decided to actually contract on with our local transit system rather than running their own transit authority, which became more efficient for them. So I think all the systems need to find better efficiencies amongst themselves first.
Gentlemen, let's take a break just for a minute while we look at program notes for here on PCN. On the issues this week, a state lawmaker wants to eliminate the property tax and replace it with a system she says is more equitable. Senator Dawn Keefer explains her proposal on Wednesday at 7 p.m. In addition to public transit, the state budget impasse has an impact on the funding of Pennsylvania libraries. Christy Bucher from the PA Library Association tells us what's at stake on Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. On Journalist Roundtable, we'll have Jillian McGoldrick from the Philadelphia Inquirer, Kate Huang-Pu from Spotlight PA, and Jackson White from WITF. They'll have the latest news for us on Thursday at 7 p.m. Thursday marks the anniversary of the crash of Flight 93 in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. It was one of 4 aircraft hijacked by terrorists on September 11th, 2001. You can see the ceremony from Shanksville on Thursday at 7:30 p.m. A football game of the week returns to PCN. Watch Ephrata versus Conestoga Valley, courtesy Blue Ridge 11 in Ephrata, Friday at 7 p.m. You can watch this show and all our public affairs programming free of charge by visiting PCNSelect.com. And while you're there, you can download our streaming service, PCN Select. PCN is Everything Pennsylvania. We're a 501c3 nonprofit television network that relies on viewers like you. To make a donation, visit PCNTV.com. Gentlemen, one more question about the SEPTA system in Philadelphia. And obviously, in the last couple of days, SEPTA is taking up all the oxygen in the room as far as the news headlines are concerned. However, there's also pressure in Pittsburgh, another big city. And how is public transportation in Pittsburgh being impacted while SEPTA is receiving all this help that we've been talking about?
So what we've heard from the leadership team at PRT, Pittsburgh Regional Transit, is that they're not such in dire need today as SEPTA. Their fiscal cliff is in January, February of next year. But it's here. It's coming. So why they would like to do,
So they're dealing with a similar situation, but it's a few months away still.
few months away. And that's what it is. So of course, SEPTA being so much larger, they're getting hurt quicker. PRT is hurt by the end of the year. They're going to see some significant changes. They've already went through some, they're going through fare increases as well. And they're hoping not to do the cuts and hoping that this is there. This was a whole big collaborative across the Commonwealth from all transit agencies to get this done. Because as I said, 67 counties are affected, and this is something that we can't stop because we have this little gap here. Let's try and get this thing. If it takes 6 months, if it takes a year, if it takes 2 years. We just don't want to kick the can, because that's what constantly happens with elected officials. We kind of try and kick this can. So sooner or later, that can's going to have nowhere to go. So we just kick the can for 2 years? No, we're going to keep on trying to push to get this done. Hopefully, we can get these capital dollars back spent where they need to be. Because when you spend capital dollars in operations, you're jeopardizing not only the safety of the system itself, but the passengers who ride that system. And that's something we have to talk about. That we have to protect everything on all fronts.
And before we go any farther on the subject of Pittsburgh Mass Transit, just how much reliance do they have on public transit compared to Philadelphia? Give our viewers an idea.
Well, obviously, it's a little bit smaller in geography, and the ridership probably.
But what about the reliance on
well,
public
transit? Well, I was going to say the number of transit riders is probably a little less, but nonetheless, they still depend on it. But I think you got to keep things a little bit in perspective, too.
Do they take kids to school like SEPTA does?
I do not know that. I don't think they do. I do believe that they do have some other financial help by some of the businesses that pay for this inner loop, according to some of my colleagues out there, which riders can get on and don't pay anything for that. Keep in mind last year when the governor flexed money from another fund, which was supposed to go to 7 different counties for rural roads and other projects that had been on the books for a long time. I believe that only went to SEPTA and none of that went to PRT. So I suspect that they will probably be asking for a similar request of whether or not they could use some of the capital money slated for them for their short-term needs and long-term. But again, I believe in my conversations with the director, they are looking at whatever kind of efficiency they can do within their own system as well. Keeping ridership up. Some of these systems still are not at pre-COVID numbers. That's a problem. You've got to have customers using your service. And I know both systems have tried to make their buses cleaner, a sense of safety. And safety is an issue, probably a little more so than what we deal with in the urban areas and these things, that some of the riders just have not felt comfortable. And even some of the bus drivers, if they have someone do fare jumping, they're not going to be arguing with them to pay the fare if they decide to jump the turnstile, get on a bus and ride around for a while. So those kinds of internal issues, I think the legislature wants to see resolved rather than just keep throwing money at the same problem. Or again, we'll be at the same discussion in another year or 2 or 3 down the road.
And spending these capital dollars is a catch-22 because to put
we'll have to go without something. Is that
put some of these measures in place that are being talked about, like fare jumping and protect. You don't have the money no more. You're now using, instead of investing in that station to make that more secure and safer, you now have to pay for operations. So you can't make those capital improvements that we're talking about because we just took $400 million off them. So we have to be careful.
That's the price of the immediate fix here.
That's the price. So that's something that they've been working on for a couple of years, and they can show them that data and all. But it's something that's a continuation that has to come to a complete halt. So hopefully they can balance their budgets as now they know what they have. Because it's hard to budget if you do not know what you have. And that's where our transit systems have been at a place where they don't know what's coming. They don't know what they have. They don't know how to budget. So hopefully this will give us a short-term fix as we keep going. And fare increases are great and all, but you have to understand, I mean, different perspective on different people. So in Philadelphia, not everybody's living in a single home. Not everybody has a bus to pick up their kids for school. We have a lot of single parents, a single mom with 2 kids. working 3 jobs at minimum wage, which hasn't gone up in so long. 50 cents for each one of those kids. That's $3 each way. That's a lot of money when you're making minimum wage. I mean, so we can't. It hurts a lot of people. So every fare increase hurts people in different ways. Some people doesn't affect, because if you're, I don't want to say, but if you're coming in to Center City from the suburbs, you might not need it as much as that person coming from the inner city that's traveling in between, just trying to get from point A to point B, because you can't afford a car for your home. You can't afford. So any fare increase hurts. On the sales tax. The sales tax revenue, we saw all the products, and every day we go to the store, those prices are going up. Well, we're paying more sales tax. Okay, we're getting more sales tax. So until you start seeing those prices drop, we're getting more money. Okay, let's call it what it is.
So we figure out a way to curb inflation.
The inflation, we're going through the roof. So you're paying sales tax, and it's going up, and it's going up, and that's why we saw a 2.9 increase. It's not because what we did here; it's because what they were doing in Washington. Okay, we're seeing it because we have to spend. There are products we have to get, and we depend on our life every day with. There are everyday products going up, and we're paying sales tax, and it's coming in. So that was why our caucus was leading that charge to go that direction. So we didn't have to do any more increases of taxes, because we are not that. We wanted to make sure the everyday person was not getting hurt, because they're getting hurt enough now.
So here we are talking about mass transit systems for about a half an hour or so. We talked about Pittsburgh and then the crisis in Philadelphia as well. And there's good news for Philadelphians there, because SEPTA services are going to be restored 100%, is my understanding,
100%.
This Sunday. So let's look at some other aspect of transportation, because after all, you're both on the committee. So let's try to put mass transit out of our minds just for now and consider anything else that's pending in the committee.
One thing I'd say is that outside the governor being able to move the capital dollars, keep in mind all these other proposals have to hit that equation Ed talked about. You've got to get it passed through the legislature. You've got to get 102 votes in the House, 26 in the Senate, and 50. So it is different, and it's a lot more difficult to do that than an executive order, because you have different perspectives. A lot of my colleagues complain. They come to Harrisburg and they see whatever that latest bus is that goes around. It used to be Rabbit, I believe, but anyhow, and they see 1 or 2 people in it. And so their perception is that's how all these systems are. They're inefficient, and so they're always looking for more efficiencies. That's one of the reasons we take the committee on a tour, so those who live in rural urban areas get a better feel for what's going on. I think sometimes we need to look outside the box, and Ed and I sometimes disagree on different things, but, I had put a proposal together for rural roads and bridges. In our area, it's hard for urban communities to understand. We actually have bridges that have been weight limited. You cannot road under this bridge if you're a certain weight. Well, that prohibits a milk truck from doing their daily pickups. Some of my farms milk 3 times a day. The fire trucks need to get over these, and if you're the water truck following the fire truck because you don't have a hydrant there, we have people going 4, 5, 6, 7 miles out around. When an emergency situation, that's a problem. Those are the kind of things that were affected when the governor flexed that money in the rural districts last year out of 7 different counties. And I'm not saying this to argue with Ed. The issue is this is what he and I have to try to balance in any proposal. I put a proposal out recently that basically said, to the credit of the majority leader, he talked in the last debate we had, in the one day we come down on Ed's bill, that we're looking at roughly $11 billion in reserves right now, 7, 8, 9 of that in a rainy day fund. And I said, well, why don't we take 500 of that per year for 5 years and put that towards rural bridges and roads to try to better get those back up to date. In an average year, we try to refurbish, replace, or refinish at least 300 bridges a year. That might not sound like a lot, but that's a lot. And the price, as I said, is going up 45%. The more we delay doing these types of things, the more it's going to cost us in the long run. I feel we can take $500 million off of the rainy day fund on an annual basis for 5 years. It's not going to hurt that much, and put it to these investments. These are investments that are for 30 years.
And that would be statewide for bridges.
Sure. And try to hit the most urgent ones, roads that have either been closed off, bridges. Some bridges in some of our rural districts actually closed. You can't use them at all. Some of them are weight limited. That may not seem like a big deal, but it is a big deal where you're waiting on a fire truck.
It takes me back to when we first got the appointment, Kerry and I. We visited a district in Northeast PA. And in order for the people to get to the supermarket, they had to actually cross over into New Jersey to go to a supermarket and come back because that road was out.
Mountain slide, whole big rock slide. They only have one lane. I mean, it's a steep road as it is.
It was craziness, and it took 2.5 years to get that road open, and it finally opened again earlier late last year. It opened, but roads and bridges are important. And that's why we made it part of the transit proposal. We made that, and that's why we recognized that 3 and 4 digits roads needed help. They needed more help because sometimes they get ignored. You know, you can't all live in Philadelphia and watch I-95 get fixed in 11 days, which is right down the street from my house. I mean, that collapse is right there. If it would have happened a day later, my son would have been on that portion going to work in Center City that day. It's a scary thought because with London Bridge, we need that help. When that falls, we need help. So we understand that. Everybody understands that. And that's why I said we don't mind helping pay the Philadelphians, and we don't mind paying those taxes to help fund those roads and bridges. But we got to look at transportation as a complicated issue. We have ports. We have airports. All these issues have been ignored. The rails, they've been ignored for a long time. We need to get a comprehensive package to fund all transportation. What that is, it's the magic number Kerry and I will, because it's funny, you think you don't know whose mouth is coming out of his or mine. It's that math equation. It's 26, 102, and 1. It really is. And together we are trying to do that. And that's what Pennsylvanians don't see. You don't see that. Because transportation is a nonpartisan committee, okay? And I say nonpartisan because there should not be any politics, because this is real stuff, and it affects real lives and real people, moving people and transporting goods and services to make sure we get food on the tables. That's what we talk about all the time, every day.
And it keeps the economy going. If you have safe roads, quality roads, and roads that have the capacity to move products, obviously your economy is growing. So it is a very difficult conundrum to be in, and it will always be a challenge. There's no silver lining that there's one particular bill that's magically going to make it better. And so you just propose. I mean, I was here for Act 89. We thought when that one bill passed, we were going to be good for years. But driving habits have changed, and people don't think about that. The working from home has had a significant negative impact. You talked a lot of restaurants, even in downtown Harrisburg, a lot of them have closed because they do not have the utilization, even our participation there, much less the locals. And that's significant. More people working from home, people are driving less, and frankly, the efficiency of why their electric cars or vehicles that now get 30, 40 miles a gallon have significantly impacted a program which we thought would carry us for at least a decade, maybe a decade and a half, and has fallen short.
And that's because people demanded it. They demanded better mileage. They got it. Now we see a demand for electric vehicles. Well, you got it. Well, it still costs money. I mean, and we're trying to. It's a tough balance.
And we got chastised for passing a simple $200 assessment on electric vehicles to help pay, but they don't pay the same. But the weight of the vehicles, and actually some would argue that the torque, how they take off, actually puts more wear and tear on the road.
Oh, that's very interesting. More torque can damage the road, the pavement.
More wear and tear, and the weight of the batteries, and they're equivalent, if not heavier, than the average car. And so it's not like you're saving anything as far as wear and tear. You may be saving things from a pollution perspective, but economically it's a draw away from our overall funding base because they weren't paying anything in liquid fuel
Some of
stacks.
those electric vehicles are 3 tons.
3 tons. So yes, and with that in mind, circles back to mass transit. We have mass transit that's not running. More roads are going to fall, get warped because more cars on them. If I had to put 300,000 more cars on the road to go to Center City, Philadelphia, we got to put money in them roads.
I think it's interesting for your
it's a whole big circle. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think it's important for your listeners to also remember Pennsylvania is somewhat unique in the fact that most of our road, bridge, and transportation things are funded through the liquid fuels tax. Other states don't necessarily do that. Some comes out of the general fund in general. But for those of my friends who like to yell at me for the price of gas, I remind them that money's earmarked, which is a good thing, that it stays specifically in providing you with a better service of quality roads. Now, there are always those who will say there's still potholes whatever. But we also live in the frost belt. We have a lot of wear and tear. So we have some unique things going on in Pennsylvania that other states don't have. Our goal is to have a chronic funding source to be able to allow us to expand capacity, because before pre-Act 89, we had no money to expand any capacity. And I live along 322 corridor. We've been building that darn thing out to a four-way forever. And it's costing us twice as much, if not 3 times as much money. So I just want people to know that it is a dedicated fund predominantly focused on roads, bridges, and other transportation needs, not going in the general fund. And that's where their money's going. It's a user's tax.
And let's talk about the pressure. The pressure, to put it in perspective, Pennsylvania has to maintain and take care of more roads and bridges than New Jersey, New York, Delaware, and all the New England states combined. That's what we take care of here. That's what we're under pressure to make sure we maintain for the people of Pennsylvania. It's a hard task. You'll see New Jersey, I live right on the other side of the bridge, and he said, oh, the real estate taxes are so high here. You know why? They don't have a gas tax. They get all the roads and bridge funding out of their real estate taxes.
Yep.
So we're doing okay here in Pennsylvania. We are. I'm not saying we're great, but we're doing really well. And we ask for your patience to try and let us get to these numbers and know why we have to get there and why we're doing what we're doing. Because nobody wants to pay more for anything. And I'm one of those. I said it last time when we did Act 89. I went home and I got in trouble. My wife said, I can't believe you did this. I was like, I did it. I said, because it was a fair tax. The more you drive, the more you pay to maintain those roads and fix those roads.
Just one more question, gentlemen. We have about 2 minutes left in our program. Now, since you're both lawmakers, I got to take advantage of the fact that you're here. So what's the next step in getting the budget complete? Now that mass transit has been, albeit addressed for a temporary time, what about the rest of the budget? When can something be on the governor's desk?
I think at the bottom line is they have the four caucuses that get together, this predominantly at the governor's office and the majority caucuses, they got to come up with an agreed spend number. When as I served a majority leader, we would start as, what's the spend number? What is it that we all can agree on affording this year?
Was it $49 billion last I checked?
Yeah, roughly. Last year's budget ended up $49 billion. And sometimes supplementals get added to that. I have to look what the total is. But at the end of the day, once you've decided on a spend under, then you can work backward to what is it that you agree is going to get an increase, or what percentage of increase is going to occur. Maybe this is going to get flat leveled, but what ultimately adds up to that number all caucuses have agreed on. I think that can happen in the next 2 weeks.
So being in the majority, Representative Neilson, what do you think that spend number will end up being? What would you like it to be?
I know what I would like it to be. I would like the governor's proposal to go through, but the reality has to sit in.
Sure.
And it's about compromise. So what I've heard from our leadership team is that compromise is happening. That spend number is not solid yet, but they are working on a spend number right around $50 billion. We're hoping this will come to fruition.
And that would in fact be more than last year.
More than last year, but not too much more. But also within, like the Representative Benninghoff said, there's compromise within. So there's going to be some stuff in there that hopefully everybody is satisfied with. And I always said a great bill is one that's not everybody's happy.
If nobody likes it, it's probably not too bad.
We're going to end on that note, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Our guests have been Representative Kerry Benninghoff, Minority Chair of the House Transportation Committee, and Representative Ed Neilson, Majority Chair of the House Transportation Committee. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
PCN's Ellen Frantz talked about the state budget impasse with a group called the PA Children and Youth Administrators.
Welcome to our program. For those who may not be familiar, can you describe what the role of your organization is?
Certainly. The Pennsylvania Children and Youth Administrators Association is an affiliate of the County Commissioners Association. We're responsible for sharing educational resources, providing conferences, training, and support to the county child welfare agents.
Can you talk a bit about how your organization is funded?
Generally, we're funded through dues that the membership pays. Each county will have an allotment based upon county size. We run a fairly lean organization. It's only myself and a part-time support staff to facilitate everything. We also have a vendor show in our June conference.
So our viewers may be familiar with the budget impasse that's been happening since June 30th. How is that affecting your organization?
As far as the PCYA, we're not really impacted by it. However, we're also fairly removed from where the rubber meets the road. As far as the counties go, I'm cutting off your next question here. The counties themselves at this point, most county child welfare agencies are doing okay at this point, only because there's sufficient lag time from prior payments coming in. I know a number of counties are not paying providers at the time. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the child welfare system, but the county agencies are responsible for providing the services on behalf of the state, which conducts investigation, or the counties conduct the investigations and provide ongoing services to ensure kids can remain safely in their home or provide out-of-home placement services for them. A critical part of all that are the contracted providers that the counties work with to actually provide those placements or in-home services or various other pieces that are critical to ensuring the system functions. So where we're at right now with the impasse is many of the counties are no longer able to continue paying providers, although that's not universal. Certainly, if they can, they do. But things are not always, there's not always sufficient reserves in the county to be able to continue funding and paying what is essentially the state's obligation until the budget impasse is ended.
What will happen if this lack of funding continues for a while?
Well, the longer it goes on, the more services are impacted. So that most counties can generally squeak by on a 2 month of reserves for child welfare. But the longer it goes, the more it impacts the counties. I'll be honest. I've been on a number of these interviews now about what's going to happen with the impasse. How's it going to affect the kids? The reality is that, I mean, the counties are going to continue to provide services. The counties are certainly not in the business of abandoning abused children. So those services the core services will continue to be provided. What is the real detriment, though, is that the longer it goes on, such as when the 2015 impasse went on for seemingly an interminable period of time, counties had to take out loans, and you end up pulling money out of the system because there wasn't any additional money given to the counties after that to compensate for all the interest that had to be pulled out. And it's not an inconsequential budget. We're talking a $2 billion child welfare budget each year. So we're not, even for a month or two, you're not talking about a small amount of money. So once counties have to start taking those tax anticipation loans or other funding streams, and the interest is not included, you're essentially pulling money out of the child welfare system because it's now reduced by whatever the total interest cost was for all the money that had to be borrowed by the counties collectively.
We've been speaking with Brian Boardman, Executive Director of Pennsylvania Children and Youth Administrators. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks to Ellen for that interview. Before we go, a reminder about On the Issues this week. A state lawmaker wants to eliminate the property tax and replace it with a system she says is more equitable. Senator Dawn Keefer explains her proposal on Wednesday at 7 p.m. In addition to mass transit, the state budget impasse has an impact on the funding of Pennsylvania's libraries. Christy Bucher from the PA Library Association tells us what's at stake on Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. That's it for the PCN Capitol Preview. I'm Larry Casper. Thanks for watching.